So hi, welcome to Church Connect. I'm Helen.
And I'm Phil.
Hi. So Phil, could you just talk a little bit about what we've been looking at this week on Life Connect?
Yeah, it's been lovely this week just to hear different stories or testimonies of different things that God has been doing in the lives of some of those who've been sharing. We've been hearing about God as a healer. Beverly shared a real personal story of that. You know, if you've missed it, really need to catch up. And God who's a provider, God who's our peace, who's with us, God who's the one who's our shepherd. And we ended off this morning just thinking about God as our helper. So it's been a real encouraging time of just learning to hear other people's stories and learning to share our own stories, really, or think through stories in our lives that we can put in a way that others can understand, which I think is the important thing. It's something that's real. And we'll come back to that, I'm sure, as we go along in this program.
Earlier this week, I caught up with Tim Cook, who's an evangelist in Greater Manchester. He also looks after Make Jesus Known, the charity up there. And he was talking about the amazing testimonies from people all over the world, really, that they've been reaching out to online. So do you want to watch that now?
That sounds great.
So hi, Tim, welcome.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So I've been hearing some amazing stories of people coming to faith online. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So we'd done some stuff online before this whole lockdown, but we really felt God wanted us to do more and more stuff online anyway. So providentially, we'd already produced some content we were going to push online, which obviously we're able to use that. And over the last few months, we've had hundreds of thousands of people watching the content we pushed. And it's just basic content, how to become a Christian. Thousands and thousands of people sharing them. We've even had like tarot reading card pages sharing our videos on how to become a Christian, and we've seen over 200 people make a commitment online through Facebook, giving their life to Jesus, saying a prayer, saying yes, I'm serious about this. I want to give my life to Him, and so it's on literally on a daily basis. We get notifications ping, oh, I've just become a Christian, what do I do now? And that's been across the UK mainly, but we've also seen, we had a message this week, someone in Pakistan, a Muslim, said, I've come across your videos, I've just become a Christian, I'm in danger of my life, what do I do now? So they really seriously meant it. But even here in the UK, you know, it's interesting, some of the messages we get. One guy messaged saying he's from a completely atheist family. He'd been to church before lockdown because he wanted to know, well, what's this about? How do you become a Christian? So he'd gone with that motivation. But when he went to the church, when you can almost imagine it, the people in the church, oh, there's a visitor. Oh, let's just be nice to them. Let's just not be too Bible bashy and heavy with them. So he says he left the church and no one had answered that question. How do you become a Christian? So then when he saw our video, which just explains that, it was like, this is what I've been searching for. We've just all given our life to Jesus. What do we do now? So yeah, I mean, it's just been incredible really for us seeing the opportunities, but for us it's seeing people actually become a Christian every single day since lockdown. It's brilliant.
So when they say, I want to become a Christian, I've come to faith, how do you then lead them, you know, how do you continue that relationship?
Yeah, so the way it basically is working for us is they see a video which explains how to be a Christian, they click find out more, which takes them through a chat bot, which is like an automated message system, where they go through this flow of, yes, I want to know more about being a Christian. We explain what that means. They then click, yes, I definitely want to become a Christian now. Here's a prayer you can pray. Yes, I've prayed that prayer. Then we can link them up. We have like an email we send out once a week with content. What does it mean now you're a Christian? They sign up for that. They give us their location so we can link them into a local church to try and connect them with someone near to them. So initially we were just doing that, but then all the feedback we were getting was, that's not enough, because just having an email once a week and a church Zoom where you sit and watch something for an hour on a Sunday and maybe a midweek Zoom wasn't enough for people. So then we created a Facebook group for them where there's over 100 people in that now, where every day we're just posting content and they're replying, asking questions. Well, how do you pray? What does it mean about this as a Christian? As well as doing a Facebook Live once a week that hundreds of people watch. So in some ways, we're just kind of making it up as we go along, just reacting to the responses we're seeing. But I guess the encouragement for us is it's them saying, we want more. We're not satisfied with just watching a church Zoom. They're hungry to ask those questions. And obviously that's sometimes quite raw, the questions they come out with as new Christians, because they've got this kind of misunderstanding of what it is to be a Christian. So it's exciting, actually.
So any advice? You've been doing this for a while now, doing church online, I guess, and speaking to people. Have you got any advice to those who may be new to all this?
Probably the biggest thing we've had people say to us is short is sweet. Maybe because that's always been our style from when we used to do stuff on the streets. We would keep it down to like really short. So our videos are normally under 3 minutes. And you can, I've been doing a video every day. I'm on to day 120 something now. You can say an awful lot in 3 minutes. So if you're doing something as a church, why talk for 30, 40 minutes when the average person only concentrates for 7 anyway? So online is even less. So I just encourage, in some ways you can miss out all the waffle that we tend to put in terms of church communication, of all the funny anecdotes, the funny story. People, they're not interested in that. They just are hungry for the truth. They just want the message in there in a relevant way. And obviously there's loads of tips you can get online about how to present to camera, how to share things, how to phrase what you're doing. So I think it's just being authentic in who you are as a church and how you communicate, but also be encouraged that it's not everyone is going to be reaching hundreds of thousands or millions, but actually maybe you're reaching 10 people who you weren't reaching before. So just invest everything you have in doing the best you can to reach those 10 people and to disciple those people, and then use other people's resources. There's so much else out there. If other people are interested, feel free to use any of our video content. There's loads of other stuff out there. Just push that and use that on your church's social media. I guess, and also I'd say just do it consistently as much as you can, rather than just, we're doing a Sunday service. People are still online every day. So just be posting stuff every day. And if you're using other people's content, that takes the pressure off you having to create some. Obviously counties have got loads of content as well. Just be putting that out there as much as you can.
Yeah, that's good advice. So finally, just used to go into schools and do concerts and different things like that to young people. So what's happening now that you can't do that?
So obviously that meant all our face-to-face stuff shut down completely. But we built up quite a good following online. We've got about 15,000 followers on social media through that. So obviously and we'd also recorded stuff beforehand, which we were going to push out anyway. So that's been going out online. It's more live stuff, interacting with the young people. We have a Faith Gang discipleship video course, 6 weeks, so we've been using that with them. But also on our Instagram, it's engaging those Christian groups of young people who've become Christians. So they're now in smaller groups within Instagram, 20 or 30 of them at a time, praying for each other, encouraging them from all around Europe, encouraging each other. And then we get them to produce, one of them, a weekly little message, which we then highlight on our page. So actually trying to equip and encourage them to grow from just receiving to actually start giving and supporting other people as a Christian. So there's ways you can do it. You just have to adapt, don't you?
Yeah, that's it. Right, well, that's great then. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right.
Cheers.
Fantastic. Right. Tim's had a decent haircut there. That was really great, though, wasn't it? Just to hear that. Fantastic news.
Great. So one of the things that struck me then when I was watching that back was how Tim mentions that, even if you're only reaching 10 people online, that, invest all your resources into those 10 people and use other resources that are out there online. So I think that's really important, that you might not be reaching thousands and thousands with your church service, but even, if you've got 5 to 10 people, that can make a big difference to those people. Yeah,
I find that encouraging just to think about that as well. And just to think through something of it's just that quality. I think, Tim emphasized that it's not so much the length, it's something that's short, but that's thought through, prayed through, of course, as well. And I think what grabbed me as well, what Tim was sharing, is that, because I know there's this issue of even young people disengaging online, and they struggle with Zoom, and even those who are using Instagram, and we're using it as churches to try and reach them, they're struggling. But just invest in that small quality input into them. But one of the things that struck me what he said is that there's youngsters who are hungry. There's a real hunger out there. And I think in some ways the hunger is for something that's real, something that really connects with them. And I think that's, again, with our stories, and when we are real about our stories and what God is doing in our lives, and even the failings of our own lives, that's this transparency, this authenticity that we were thinking about last week in our series that we did, is such an important thing for young people. It's just to be short and snappy, but real, I think is what I take away from Tim.
Definitely. It's exciting, isn't it? 360.
So whoever it is.
One evangelist, 3 questions, 60 seconds.
I am an early bird. I tend to wake up about 5 a.m. in the morning and get up around about 5:30, usually full of energy. So I help myself to a cup of coffee, and then I'll go and spend the next hour or so in the Lord's presence, just having a quiet time and preparing myself for the rest of the day. The downside of which is that by about 9:30 in the evening, I'm totally useless. I can't function and just want to curl up and go to sleep. The best book I've ever read is The World According to Garp. If ever you want to experience what it is to live a hedonistic lifestyle, to really have a pointless life, then it's an amazing book to read and a real challenge to us who try and live a life honouring God. And as for the best bit of advice I ever had, it came from my grandmother. I was in my early teens and my best friend had really badly let me down. And she said to me that people can only let you down if you expect more of them than they're capable of giving. And I guess there's a great hidden truth in that.
So our next interviewee is Julian Gutteridge from Hull. He's a counties evangelist and he has a real heart for reaching out to those in ethnic communities. So I caught up with him to find out more about some testimonies from the people that he's met along the way. Hi Julian, welcome to Church Connect.
Hi, great to meet you and everybody online.
Can you start off by telling us a little bit about your ministry up in Hull?
Well, me and my wife Ella, we mainly work with ethnic minorities, especially Muslims, in the East Riding of Yorkshire and in Hull itself. So that's the main sort of level of focus in the work that we do, as well as other ethnic minorities like Chinese, but mainly Muslims.
Okay, and this week we're looking at testimonies, and can you share some inspiring stories from the people that you may have helped come to faith?
Well, before we moved to Hull, we saw a particular move of God's Spirit amongst Muslims in Birmingham, especially asylum seekers from Afghanistan and Iran, and Kurdish people, who we saw some of those people come to faith. This was initially done through door-to-door visitation in an area where there was lots of Muslims, but we had the joy of seeing some of these Muslims come to faith, especially Iranians and one Afghan. Would you like me to share about one or two examples?
Yes, please.
Well, there's one particular Muslim, I won't mention his name for his safety. He came from Iran. He'd been training to be a imam in Iran. And you remember September the 11th, on the 9th of 9/11, he started coming to our English classes that we were running, but he was quite aggressive to us. And on that particular day, when the aeroplanes went into the Twin Towers, he came out saying Allah Akbar, which means God is great, down with America. But having worked with him and studied the Bible with him for a little while, invited him to our house for meals, 6 months later, he came to trust in the Lord as his saviour. If we read in the book of Romans, and he's still practicing his faith, he now lives in down south. So that's amazing to see such a transformation for somebody who was quite conservative and radicalized to coming to trust in the Lord as his saviour. And also one of the great joys that we had was leading an Iranian family to the Lord. One particular lady who was such a blessing and had to flee from Iran for even having in their possession a Bible, which it was enough for the police to try and arrest them and invade or break into their house. And as a family, they felt unsafe, so they escaped to the UK. And we had the joy that she was praying that she would meet a Christian that she could understand more about the Christian faith with as an asylum seeker in the UK. And this is a case is that if you don't reach out, you don't reach these people. We made contact with her, and within the space of 4 or 5 months, we saw her come to living faith in the Lord. And what was so encouraging, she used to take notes of everything that we said, and she was really learning about the Christian faith, and it changed her life and influenced her family's life as well. So it's a real joy to see some of these people come on this journey of faith, which started in Iran. That somebody dared to give her a Bible in Iran. And as a result, the Lord's brought her to faith through his word. There's many other things I could mention. I mean, do you want me to mention another person, or is that enough?
No, you go ahead.
The other person is a friend of mine, another Iranian, who's whilst in Iran, their daughter was seriously ill, and they took her to hospital in Iran, one of the hospitals, and she wasn't improving, so they took her to see a Shia imam, and he wrote a portion of the Quran out and dipped it in water and made the child drink the water in the belief that this would heal her. Instead, her condition got worse. But my friend, I can mention his name, Hujat, he was reading the Quran where it says in chapter 3 and chapter 19 about Jesus healing the sick and raising the dead. So they prayed, he prayed with his wife to Jesus, and his daughter was miraculously healed in Iran. And because she came from a conservative background, there was pressure from the family, and they were worried about informing the police, the religious police, and eventually it led to him making the decision to flee Iran. And again, I met him doing door-to-door visitation, and he came to trust in the Lord as his saviour, and now, amazingly, he has been involved in leading an Iranian church plant in a city which I won't mention. But and then we had the joy of seeing his whole family also come after gaining asylum in the UK. So those are 3 examples. There are many more, but at the moment in Hull, it's mainly a period of sowing the seed. We'd love to see more Muslims come to the faith, but in Hull at the moment we're not seeing this, but we are being faithful in sowing the seed and befriending people. So that's a bit of short story of the sort of things that we've experienced. It's not easy for these Muslims, as you can imagine, because they face persecution. And any churches that seek to reach with Muslims will also become targeted. But we believe that the gospel has the power to transform lives. So that's a little bit of our work.
Thank you very much for sharing with us today. It's been great to have you on.
Thank you. It's been wonderful. I hope it's been a blessing to all the people in the various churches that this message is going out online. Thank you very much, Helen.
So great, isn't it, to hear some of these stories about people who have had no background in faith in Christianity at all, but have come to faith in Jesus, and through such unusual ways as well. But in some senses, in the economy of God, they're not unusual. It's just God is working constantly behind the scenes. And that's what strikes me so much about story and testimony. You don't know what your story or testimony is going to do.
That's true. So how important do you think testimonies are for churches to share?
I think it's striking me more and more. I've just been doing some preparation and to speak on John 9, interestingly enough, this morning. I was preparing and I was thinking about this, that in the story where Jesus heals a man who's born blind, and it gets to a point when he's been healed and he's in conversation with the Pharisees, and they're really tough questions. And then he reaches a point where he says, all I know is, I'm paraphrasing here, is once I was blind, but now I see. And so basically he's saying, this is my story. You know, I can't answer all your questions, which is interesting, because going back to what Julian was saying, you know, in a sense, we may not have all the answers to how a Muslim, or what a Muslim believes, or what a Sikh believes, and so on. But one thing we can always fall back on is our own personal story. I come up with this phrase, or I don't think I came up with it originally. Someone would have said it, that we've got to learn to tell our story to tell his story. So I think it's such a crucial part. And earlier in the week, we were thinking of stories of healing and stories of God providing. And so it's not just our salvation stories, if you like, it's stories of if I can quote Beverly when she quotes one of the verses, the testimonies of God's goodness and experience within our lives. And it's, again, if you look at Luke when he writes in the book of Acts, he relates the story of Paul, or Paul's conversion, and I think it's 3 times in the book of Acts. So Paul keeps on coming back to his story of his journey of faith. Or put it another way, it's stories of our journey to God, and then those subsequent stories of a journey with God, of God's goodness and God's faithfulness and God's kindness to us. So for me, I think testimonies or our story, telling our stories, is crucial. I think 1 Peter puts it beautifully, doesn't it? Yeah, Peter says, to anyone who asks you for the reason that the hope you have, you need to be prepared to give that reason. So you've got lives that are causing people to ask questions, but when they ask those questions, we can begin to relate the story of God's working in our lives, how we're part of God's bigger story. But that's where it starts. It started in my life, and this is what God has been doing in my life. So I think testimonies are really crucial.
Do you think it's harder online to share a testimony than it is with somebody that you know?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think we've got someone who's going to share something on that in just a second. But I would say it's probably just Matt's going to make this point as you listen to him now. It's a really crucial point. Is trusting God just to take our simple story and that God will use it. You don't know what God's going to do, but whether it's online or it's face-to-face, socially distanced over a coffee table or in your garden, it's just placing that little seed of what God has done for you and in you, that somehow is just going to trigger. The Holy Spirit can use that as a trigger in someone's heart.
Should we take a look at Matt's top 8 tips for evangelizing online now? See what it says.
Hello everyone, my name's Matt. I run chatnow.org, which is a website where people can go and explore faith and chat with a Christian at any time of day or night to find out about Jesus. I've got some tips for you about evangelism online. Tip number 1 is don't argue with people in online public places. Doesn't really achieve much. It frustrates a lot of people. It wastes a lot of time. So don't bother arguing in online public places. Tip number 2 is a great one for social media, and it's this: show genuine interest in people. Be interested in what they're interested in. Be interested in their families, their personal lives, their opinions. Show interest, genuine interest in other people. Tip number 3 is imagine you are wearing a large hat with these words in big bold letters across it: I'm a follower of Jesus. Tip number 4 is realize that because you're wearing this imaginary big hat, everyone already thinks you're a bit weird for being a follower of Jesus. And now you don't have to hide it. Now you don't have to force it upon people. You can just be normally weird because that's what they think you already are. What I mean by that is just be genuine. When it's relevant to talk about your faith, talk about it. Look for opportunities to talk about it. Don't hide it, but also realize you don't need to force it into conversations because everyone can see who you are and what you believe from your big imaginary hat. Tip number 5 is be natural about it. The more natural your faith is to you, the more it will feel less awkward and odd to others to be around you or to ask you questions about it. So talk about your faith, talk about going to church, talk about God or something about the Bible. Talk about it in a natural way as if it's just the normal everyday thing. And people will then feel able to naturally and normally ask you about it. Tip number 6. is know what you believe about Jesus and how to explain it in normal everyday words that someone that doesn't know anything about God, never been to church, will understand. The more we're able to put it into simple terms, the more confident we'll be about sharing it, the less frightening it will seem, and also the more willing we'll be to be led by the Spirit to know what or how much to share with them. Tip number 7 is trust that God is taking people on a spiritual journey, and it's okay to be just one part of that journey. This kind of thing frees us up to realize that we don't always have to share everything with everyone all of the time. That sometimes being part of the journey is more important than just getting everything off our chest. But always be ready to go further and always be prepared to explain it all. Tip number 8 is my final tip, and it's realised from tips 1 to 7 that actually sharing your faith online is very similar to sharing your faith offline. God wants us to have genuine concern for people, be confident in what we believe, and tell people about him both offline and online by being as natural about our beliefs and faith as possible.
Right, that was great listening to that. Thanks, Matt, for that. For me, I think one of his points that really stood out was the wearing the big hat, saying that you're a follower of Jesus. So I must admit, I find that quite hard with non-Christian friends, and I have to admit some who don't even know I'm a Christian online, that to have that imaginary hat on, and then just to take away that pressure that you think, oh, they're going to think I'm strange or weird, when they don't, because they know me anyway. So I should be more open and share with people and not be afraid. So that really stuck out for me, that I'll try and wear this hat now from now on.
Yeah, and I guess it's the stuff we choose, isn't it, to share or put up online as well, can also, something that's caught our attention, something that's very deep and real. But I've had sort of folks who aren't followers of Jesus comment back to me on some of those things. So your hat is on, but and I think the other thing that caught my attention with what Matt was sharing was this sense, just a reminder to me, just to be showing genuine interest, that it's about interest about their lives, and people catch that even online, that you're concerned, because otherwise we've commented, my wife and I've commented sometimes, that person doesn't ask many questions about our lives. So we need to think that from the other side, think, okay, we need to be, and it's genuine. It's not just force. It's that sense of being genuine, and we ask about the details of their lives, and in that way.
Yeah, because I think sometimes if you're chatting maybe on social media with somebody, but you're behind an organisation or a church logo, it doesn't always seem personal, does it? So it's letting them know that there's a person behind doing, typing out that message and connecting with them, after they've been online in a genuine way. Yeah.
And I guess ultimately what we're doing, as we've talked all the way through this week, is that it's pointing folks to Jesus, and it sometimes is that gentle, point away to Christ and what he has done in our lives. And as we said earlier, it's about us living lives that cause people to ask those questions. But it's been that, well, I quoted that verse from 1 Peter earlier, always be prepared to give a reason for the hope that you have when people ask you. But the last bit says this, and do it with gentleness and respect. And there is a danger sometimes as evangelists or people just bold to share our faith, that we forget the gentleness and respect. We need boldness, but because we said about Christ as Lord, as that verse says, but we also need that gentleness and respect in what we do.
Yeah, definitely.
Talking about what you were saying earlier about trusting God on the journey reminds me of a story years ago when I was about 17 and not long past my test, and I was with my grandfather, who was an elder in the Brethren church, and we were driving. I'd convicted that morning about I needed to share my faith more, and then there was a hitchhike at the side of the road, and my grandfather stopped and picked him up, and I felt this sense of God saying to me, that prompted my heart to say something about my faith. But my grandfather was there. He's an elder. So I didn't do it. I chickened out. And I remember being so upset about it. And that night I said, Lord, just give me another opportunity. The next day I was driving in my grand's car. I was on my own. And as I was driving, I remembered what I prayed, and there was another hitchhiker. These are a few years ago. So I thought, right, got to pick them up. So I stopped the car, opened the door. The guy got in, and I started out with my story to get to tell Jesus' story about how and then within literally 30 seconds, I realized he didn't speak one word of English. But amazingly, I had a few leaflets, evangelistic leaflets, and I was able to give it. But I kept on thinking, that part of the story, because I was trusting God in that situation, whether it's online or whether it's in the physical context of sitting in a coffee shop or on a bus or whatever, I've just got to be prepared just to be that one step in that person's journey of faith. So whether that leaflet, I will not know, maybe until I get to heaven, what the impact of this simple trusting God and stepping out in faith, if you like, actually did in that person's life. But there we are.
So thanks, Phil, for that. That's very encouraging. So that's all from us this week for Church Connect. So join us next week. Life Connect will be looking at the theme of church planting, and then the magazine show will also feature some interviews with church planters as well. So thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.